All right, we're gonna start, so I'll invite my speakers up to the stage. So that's Brent, so if you can, out there. Right there, here.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay, welcome everybody to the final day of the conference and the final session of the day. So, this session, let me see if I find the pointer here. Before we go into the session, once again, I want to thank to our metal sponsors that make this conference possible. You can see their logos here on the screen, so thank you very much to all of them. To the Almond conference, the platinum sponsor as well, Borrell, the gold sponsor, etc. Where is the? Okay. Trying to get to the session. 1 second. I'm wondering if the session slides, if you can pull them up. Otherwise, I skip a lot of sponsors. So. I guess while we put the slides up, this is the replanting an almond orchard in today's financially challenging world. There we are. And again, I'm the moderator. I'm Sebastian Saa. I'm the Associate Director of Agricultural Research at the Almond Board of California. And replanting and not working. So replanting an almond orchard probably is one of the most crucial decisions that a grower may face. A decision that will impact their operation for probably the next 25 years. And therefore, this decision should, of course, be meticulously considered, very carefully considered, and the actions taken should be the result of thorough analysis. However, even when with comprehensive planning, happens, making such decision is not easy. And it's definitely not easy in today's financially challenging world. So it's precisely due to these challenges that we organized this session for this particular year, where we understand things are more difficult than in average years. So over the next 90 minutes, we aim to share with you not only the classic consideration of essentials that are essential for orchard replanting, but also additional factors that can make the process more viable. So to achieve this, we will start with a presentation from UC Farm Advisor Brent Holtz, here at my left, who will discuss whole orchard recycling and tree planting. Following that, we will dive into considerations surrounding infrastructure, covering aspects such as soil mapping, VRI, row width, irrigation system, pumpings, and infiltration. Matt Cox, the second speaker here, from Capay Farms, will provide insights into these topics. Then we will conclude our session by hearing from Greg Browne of USDA ARS, who will share his latest discoveries on alternatives to soil fumigation. And additionally, Roger Duncan, at the end of the table there, will present his work on rootstock selection, drawing from decades of research discovery. Literally decades. Roger has been working in it, helping us to identify what rootstocks work for what, and I think he has really good insights to share with us along those lines. So we hope that these sessions proves valuable in assisting you through the complexities of replanting decisions in almond orchards. And again, replanting during these difficult times. So with that said, I'm going to move to Brent Holtz.
Thank you, Sebastian. We were supposed to be the all-star cast that was going to keep all the attendees here at the end of the prom. You promised that. So anyway, welcome to the ones that are still here. Thank you on this 82nd anniversary of Pearl Harbor. So I thought I'd mention that with diversity, but I guess I better start talking about proper almond tree planting. One of the main things I wanted to mention is the root hairs of trees when we plant them are, especially if we're planting dormant trees, can dry out quickly, so we should keep the roots covered as long as possible. There's a lot of carbohydrates stored in those roots. Don't heavily prune the roots. I would usually recommend treating them with Galtrol, Agrobacterium radiobacter, a biocontrol agent to control crown gall. I usually would spray the roots on, not dip them like this. If you're planting bare root trees, I would recommend digging a hole large enough for the root system you're planting, especially if you got a nice 3/4 inch tree. I've seen planting crews smash up the roots into a little ball and put them in a smaller hole. So if you have a big tree, dig a big hole for that tree. Allow some space for settling. Plant the tree high on a berm. Don't pull the berm up after you plant the tree. This is an illustration on the left of, you can see where I'd like the soil line to be, right at the top of that highest root. And a lot of people think the soil line ought to be at the graft union, and in the picture there on the left, you can see the graft union is clearly above the soil, but the tree on the right, the soil line was at the graft union, and that will make the tree much more susceptible to Phytophthora root rot that Greg might talk about some on today. But anyway, so when I see a tree planted improperly, it was usually planted too deep, and it's often got a Phytophthora infection. I like to recommend watering the trees in at planting just a little bit to get the soil around the root hairs. Even if the soil is wet, I would still recommend a couple gallons. And the Almond Board of California has produced a nice video on tree planting that should be out pretty soon, so I would suggest looking for that. I want to talk a little bit about combining whole orchard recycling with planting a tree, though, and a lot of growers now are using double-line drip systems, and the tree on the left was an example of the double-line drip didn't really line up with any tree, and there was a little berm left, and the water would just run down the hoses, and so that there were a lot of trees like that were kind of drying up. They weren't getting the water or the fertilizer being fertigated to them. Now the one on the right just happened to hold the water, and it was getting enough water. But a double-line drip system cannot be the best system if you've got a berm and the water's running off the drip. And this was the case in an orchard that had the previous orchard was recycled, and there were 64 tons of biomass that was put back in the ground. And this grower, Louis Talarico in Manteca, called me up and threatened me with my life because I convinced him to recycle, and his trees stopped growing, and the carbon to nitrogen balance was out of whack, and we hadn't even put a herbicide down in 2 years, and there wasn't a single weed growing it either. So we doubled our nitrogen applications in this orchard. We ended up putting 100 units out that first year. Usually we put about 30 to 35 in a first-year orchard after recycling. That year we put out 100, and we got the trees to grow well, but it started a series of experiments of how much fertilizer did we need to put out after whole orchard recycling. And this is with another grower where we had an actual nitrogen trial early on, and I planted the tree on the right, got 0.8 ounces of N in early March, and we got a good rain that got watered in, and those pictures were taken in April with another fertilizer was put out. But if we got that fertilized in early, there was a really big difference that was amazing to see just in 1 month with that early fertilizer. So that started a series of experiments where we started fertilizing early. And this was some leaf analysis from that trial where we started the leaf analysis in May. We should have started it in March because we might have been able to see bigger differences. But anyway, we could see right away early on correspondence in leaf tissue nitrogen with that trial. So this trial, you can see whole orchard recycling treatment on the right at 70 tons per acre at Kearney, control on the left. We actually added 4.5 that's 5 ounces of N per tree, and it was 45 pounds per acre. So we came down a lot from 100 pounds. And at the end of the season, the whole orchard recycling treatment actually looked larger than the control for the first time instead of the opposite. And when we looked at trunk diameters, we had a significant increase with whole orchard recycling, even though we added the same amount of fertilizer to those trees. So we think there was some nitrogen mineralization going on. Leaf analysis showed it. I had almost 4.5% nitrogen in leaf analysis, which I've had some fertilizer trials where I don't think I ever got it much higher than that. So we got a good response with the same amount of fertilizer. So I think there's some nitrogen mineralization going on that I'm going to talk about a little later. But we've continued to see an increase in trunk diameter in this trial from the get-go, whereas in other trials it took a while for the whole orchard recycling treatment to catch up. But I want to mention when we put down 64 tons per acre, there's actually nitrogen in that wood, almost 400 pounds per acre. There's about 250 pounds of potassium in that wood. There's about 800 pounds of calcium in that wood, and of course 64,000 pounds of carbon in that wood because the wood chips are 50% carbon. But we always get the question, can we return this organic matter to the soil without negatively impacting the next generation? This is 100 ton per acre of walnut being recycled right here. And I just want to point out that if these wood chips are incorporated properly, this is 64 tons per acre is 120,000 pounds of wood chips on that surface. But if you looked at the weight of the top 6 inches of soil, it's about 2 million pounds of soil. So the better you incorporate those wood chips into the soil, the less problem you're going to have with negative nitrogen tie-up. And if you incorporate into the first 12 inches of soil, it's going to be less than 3%. So this is a picture from Christine Gimperle's orchard where she used a plow to incorporate the wood chips. And I think this has probably been the best method of incorporation that I've seen. Sometimes the wood chips are so thick, I've seen the disc roll over the top. And this is my old college textbook picture that I still like to show of the soil organic matter being a big black box where it binds and releases nitrogen, holds it in the soil profile, helps prevent it from leaching. But when we add an amendment like these wood chips, how long does it actually take these wood chips to actually become part of the soil organic matter? And that's what I'm going to talk about, this 2,000 barrel trial that I see Gabrielle in the audience, so she'll remember this, where I took a wood chipper and ground out a bunch of almond wood chips. I planted 1/3 part wood chips to 2/3 part soil because at that stage I didn't have any idea of how much mass was in an orchard when we recycled it. It turned out to be a 300 ton per acre rate, so I really overestimated what actually happened in the field. So 1/3 part wood chips were mixed with 2/3 part soil. They were put in these 35-gallon containers, 1 almond tree per container. So 10 barrels received wood chips and soil mixture, and 10 barrels just received soil. I never fertilized this trial. I tortured these trees, but the water I was using had 49 parts per million nitrate in it, so it was getting nitrogen from the water. And here are the trees growing on the left. I saw all sorts of mushrooms growing in the wood chip treatment, so there was microbial activity. This was the main graph that I wanted. This is trunk circumference, but in this trial, I had a decrease in trunk circumference the first 4 years compared to the control, but at the 4th year, they had evened out, but by the 5th and 6th year, I was starting to see an increase in trunk circumference from those wood chips. And this is basically what I wanted, and I moved my attention to the Iron Wolf Kearney trial in 2008, and I forgot about this barrel trial, but occasionally I would remember to come back and sample it. And I finally just analyzed a lot of this data because I'm trying to write this up, and here's a 23-year graph, but what was amazing is this is soil organic matter, and you could see there was a spike. It was significant, but there was a spike at 7 years that I didn't expect to encounter that lasted for 17 to 20 years. And even at 23 years later, the soil organic matter is still significantly greater in the wood chip treatment. So how long does it take those wood chips to benefit the next generation orchard? And I saw a similar graph with organic carbon. I'm going to go, and this is important too, we can say we still have significant carbon levels 23 years later after this treatment. And I promised Sebastian I would get through this in 20 minutes, so the next slides I'm just going to show real quickly, but it's data from this trial that I wanted to show how the nutrition component showed up. So anyway, there's initial immobilization with all the wood chips of the nitrogen, then a mineralization where the nitrogen is released. So anyway, this is nitrate levels in this trial. Again, we see a spike at 7 years later starting that seemed to hit a peak 17 years later, although if you can see at the end, I wasn't sampling this trial every year anymore. We had a spike with ammonia. We saw increased levels in zinc. We saw increased levels of calcium through the whole trial. We saw increased levels of magnesium. We saw increased levels of potassium, although it leveled out at the end. We saw phosphorus significantly increased in this trial. And we saw the cation exchange capacity follow the same curve. We saw electrical conductivity stay increased. And we saw a significant decrease in the pH with the organic matter, which would be expected. Anyway, this is what I decided to kill this trial off once and for all. And this is what a tree looks like. That's the root system that's subjected to 23 years in a barrel. But the soil on the left, had definitely changed with all those wood chips. It was a dark, very high organic soil, and the control on the right was visually different after all that time. I'm gonna switch bases a little bit. This is one of Cameron Zuber's slide from one of his work at the Kearney Ag Center, where we have a whole orchard recycling trial. But the main point is that in the wintertime, the wood chips are holding significantly more water than the controls. And in the summertime, we're putting on the water to meet the tree's demand, but we don't see a significant increase in water holding capacity in the summertime, but we do in the wintertime. We also saw increased infiltration with the wood chips. This is just to show the whole orchard recycling didn't really increase until the Air Board started giving out money for growers to recycle, but at this point, this 2023 report, over 3,000 growers have received funding now for whole orchard recycling, and 162,000 acres now have been recycled. The governor signed this AB 2101 last year, the California Carbon Sequestration and Climate Resiliency Project Registry for whole orchard recycling projects, and an additional $178 million was made available for whole orchard recycling projects. So there's going to be some good funding for a couple years in the future. This project has become a large project and involved a large number researchers now that I'm very thankful for. They at least can seem to write the papers that are waiting for me to write. But anyway, I don't know. Am I on time? You haven't.
Have 5 more minutes.
I have 5 more minutes. My gosh, I rushed.
That's fine.
Anyway,
Question.
I'll stop. Oops.
That's good.
Thank you very much. And the questions are at the end?
Yep.
Is that you? Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
So, Matt.
All right, here we go. Well, thank you, everybody. My name is Matthew Cox, here today to talk about irrigation infrastructure, maybe some considerations to have, questions you should ask when you're developing or redeveloping an orchard. A little bit about myself. I've worked for Capay Farms up in the Sacramento Valley for about 20 years now. During that time, I was always encouraged to ask questions, be curious, that kind of stuff. So over those 20 years, we've done dozens of developments, and I've learned a lot from people that are smarter than me. Hopefully today I can pass on a little bit of what I learned. First up, 3 questions that I think everyone should be asking if you're going to reuse a system or you're going to be putting in a new system. Number 1, what are you starting with? What's your water source? What kind of main lines? What kind of distribution system do you have out there? Sprinklers, soil types. Do you have that information? Can you get it? What are you trying to do? It's an irrigation system, yeah, let's meet ET for the trees, but there's other capabilities of the irrigation system that have unique needs. Are you gonna try to inject your fertilizer? Are you gonna have frost control? Maybe you've got an old flood system and you can do some sort of groundwater recharge. Next up, are you gonna use it? You're the expert of your ranch, of your operations. If you're not gonna use it, be honest with yourself, don't invest in it. Also, try to find a partner that has a similar vision of your expectations, a similar vision of success. Make sure that you're in line with them so that you know what you're gonna get and know that you're gonna use it. Okay, let's start off water source. Where are you getting your water from? If it's coming from a well, the first thing you should probably be looking for is a test pump. That's gonna tell you your SWL, your standing water level, your pumping water level, the gallons per minute that you can get out of that hole in the ground, the well. Also, what is the sand? Typically, you get more sand if you're trying to pump and harder on that given water source. Well completion report. This is going to tell you all the physical characteristics of that well, the depth of the well, the diameter of the casing. We have a lot of wells that do have a reduction at a certain depth. You need to know that if you're going to be trying to drop bowls past that amount. Sometimes there's wells that don't have casing all the way to the bottom. You really don't want to put your bowls down there past the casing. Likewise, where are the perforations in your casing? Where's the blank pipe? All of that is going to help you determine where to place your equipment and have the best success. Do you have any videos of the well? This is going to tell you the condition of it. Over time, these things do degrade. You get holes, you get rust, you get separations of the casing. All of those things can be prepared. There's a lot of people out there that can help you with it. We've done it multiple times and had success. Be it plugging a hole or unplugging perforations. All of that can be determined with the video. My suggestion to you, if you are going to do a repair, if you are going to do cleaning, get a video before and after. Make sure that you got the results that you expected. And then next up, do you have any historic pumping water levels? Either from manually taking soundings or maybe you've got a level transducer and you can get that real time. That information, it's going to be valuable to make sure that your pumps are performing as they were initially planned to at installation, or maybe there's certain days of the week that's cheaper for you to pump because the pumping water level is a little bit higher. A place where you can save a little bit of money. Here's 2 examples of some information you should maybe be looking for. On the left, that's a well completion report. Those are typically filed at the county in case you didn't install the well for you. It's going to tell you your depth, your diameter, the soil type. It's got a lot of great information. On the right is a well schematic. That's a little bit newer report that we're getting as we're doing some developments. I'm a visual person. I like the diagram on the right. Tells me all about the well. But really, I can get the same information out of both of those reports. So If you're gonna be trying to adjust the bowls, the pumps in your well, try to find one of those and make sure that you're putting, all your equipment in the right spots. Okay, surface water. I admit where we're at, I'm kind of spoiled. The water district delivers water to us in a pipe at 5 PSI to the farm edge. So things are pretty nice for us. We don't have a lot of canals or reservoirs that we have to deal with. I'm sure there's a lot of people in the crowd today or in the trade show that could help you with that. But some of the stuff that I would be looking for if you're going to try to utilize surface water on your ranch, number one, what is the capacity of your outlets? A lot of time, water districts or canals are going to report that information in CFS. It's an easy conversion to gallons per minute, 448. Both of those are measurements of flow, just 2 different units. Next up, the delivery schedule. Do you have to order this water a week in advance, but you can take it when you want it? Other water districts that we're in, they say when the water's available, you take it or not, but you gotta wait, another week or 2 before the water is gonna come back to you. Those things are critical when you're designing your pump stations, your filtration. Are you gonna be at someone else's, schedule when they say the water, or are you gonna get the water when you want it? Reservoir capacity, I think that's pretty basic. Yeah, you're gonna want that information, particularly if you're gonna use that reservoir for frost. I'm gonna wanna know how many hours of frost control I have out on a reservoir. That's gonna help me on a frost night determine when I'm gonna turn it on. Also, how long will it take to refill your reservoir? And then scheduled cleanings. That's important, particularly if you have organic. Sometimes the cleaning agents you don't want to put on your organic field, you could lose some certification, or also just all that dead, nasty debris coming down. That's a great way to plug your filters. Maybe after a cleaning, you're going to want to open discharge, get rid of some of that dirty water before you do plug up all your filters. So talk to your water district, talk to the people that are doing any cleanings of your system. Make sure you know when that's going to be happening. Okay, water quality. This is strictly for irrigation suitability. You can send water samples to all the different labs around here. Ask them for irrigation suitability testing or plugging potential. Some of the stuff that you're going to get on those reports, I'll break into kind of 3 different categories of things that could plug irrigation systems. First off, inorganic materials. This is all your minerals, your salts, your bicarbonates, basically all the same stuff that you've got hard water spots in your shower. It's the same thing, it can plug up your irrigation system. Ways to treat that, you can adjust the pH, you can find chelating agents. I'm sure there's a lot of other great things out there. pH adjustment chelating agents are the ones that have worked best for us, but maybe you've found a great solution for your own. Organic issues plugging your system, that's gonna be the microbiology out there. Algae, slime-forming bacteria, as well as all the other fun little critters that are in the water. For us, it seems like that is more seasonal. So if you identify what it is that's plugging it, and you can kind of take some notes, if you are treating that, you don't have to treat it at the same rate throughout the season. Understand if it's temperature dependent or when exactly those blooms take place, and adjust your water treatment accordingly. Again, adjusting the pH, adding chlorine, adding copper, as well as many other things can take care of a lot of this organic substances in the water that plug your emitters. The next up is probably my favorite category of things that can plug sprinklers is weird stuff. Identify it, man. Like, we have seen bugs, we have seen squirrels, we've seen little weed seeds go out there and plug all the emitters we have. Don't just go crank up the machine thinking that you're gonna unplug those emitters if you haven't identified it. Sometimes it's a weed species that's growing in your strips that's finding its way into the irrigation system. If you can eliminate that, then you don't have this issue. But always try to identify what it is that's plugging your system and keep accurate notes. Water quality when it comes to plant health, I'm not really gonna touch on that today. Talk to your PCAs, your CCAs, but they are gonna be absolutely interested in your water quality. That's gonna help with your nitrogen management plan and all the fertilizer recommendations that they're gonna give you. Also, the stuff you're putting into the spray tank, that water, can tie up the nutrients, can tie up the pesticides that are getting quite expensive. So make sure if you do need to condition that water to make sure all those molecules are available and get into the site, as needed. Sometimes water conditioning is a lot cheaper than adding more material to the spray tank. Okay, distribution system. Now that you've got some water, how are you getting it out to the trees? If you are gonna reuse a system, make sure you've got an irrigation map. We have tried without an irrigation map, and trust me, you will chase down leaks and find problems, and probably wish that you did a little bit more exploring before you just went out there and tried to reuse a system. If you're buying a new system, the vendor should have time to walk you through that map and make sure that you understand that system as well as they do. You're paying a lot for these irrigation systems, make sure you understand what you're getting. And you should be able to do that all off of a map before you ever buy anything. Okay, main lines. This is a big ticket item for new installs. This is also a big ticket item where you can save some money if you're gonna try to repurpose it for a second generation. If you are reusing it, definitely go pothole it, identify it, make sure you know the size of it, where it's at. Keep that pothole open, go have your surveyor locate it, put it on your tree maps, put it on your irrigation designs, know where the old pipe is and where the new pipe is. Also, while you got it open, clearly identify it for your land levelers, your ripping people. Those guys are driving tractors the size of a 2-story house, and it is a really uncomfortable conversation when you have to go tell your boss that the D10 found the new main line you installed out there because you didn't identify it clear enough. Trust me, that's not a fun conversation. Okay, valves. Above ground or below ground, start there. We're trying to relocate all of our valves above ground, even if it's the old manual butterfly valve or automated. It's gonna make maintaining them and watching them a lot easier. If you are gonna switch to automated valves, maybe you don't have that upfront cost when you're installing it. But if it's all above ground, you're gonna be able to swap that out a lot faster. And the automated valves do take more maintenance. But another takeaway from here, I love automated valves. It is labor savings. You don't have to send a guy out there every time you want to change the water. It also does allow you to irrigate differently. You can change frequency and duration by your soil types and your water holding capacity much easier when you have automated valves. Now you're saving on labor, you're saving on water, you're saving on utilities. The other great thing, if you get a pressure switch downstream of your valve, you're getting automated data, automated reports. You don't have to guess how much water each block got. You're getting reports that can show you exactly how much. Another thing to keep an eye out for, a lot of the automated valves, a lot of the new valves, you can find are pressure reducing. That is going to be a different pressure at the pump station as opposed downstream of the valve. Make sure you have a pressure gauge or something downstream of the valve. Should you ever switch between your emitters from a micro to a solid set, you're gonna have to adjust those. They typically are adjusted one time and set, but it only takes a couple minutes once per season to go out there and make sure that your downstream, your emitter pressure is what you're expecting. Okay, the next part after the valves, that's gonna be your submains and your lateral pipe. If you're gonna try to save this, more power to you, but there's gonna be some trade-offs. There's a lot of opportunity here, but there is trade-offs. You're not gonna be able to do as much tillage. So is your soil one that is loose enough and that kind of stuff that maybe you're not gonna have to go through and till the whole thing? Is your rootstock vigor enough to get through some of that layering? Know your soils, know your rootstock that you're gonna put in there if you're gonna go this route and not be able to till the soil as expected. Even when you're trying to save all that system, you can still adjust your planting densities. You can plant more trees down the row. You just got to get kind of creative. Couple ranches we've had lately, it was an old solid set system. We've got now a dual system where I've kept the old solid set system, planted more trees down the row, but we also added double line drip. That is amazing. I get to irrigate the way I want. I get to fertigate. If I get behind, I can turn on the solid set or dust control. It's the best of both worlds, but you really are buying and maintaining two irrigation systems. So keep that in mind. If that's not your speed, or you do want to utilize the underground system but go to micros, we've done that really commonly. That's working out great. I've actually seen a neighbor that took an old underground system and is trying to convert it to above ground poly hose. He's had it in the ground a couple years. It looks good so far. We'll see over the life of the orchard, but there's a lot of opportunity to save there. Another thing that we've done that I think it would be interesting, especially as the climate changes, or economic climate changes, is if you're trying to convert from one commodity to another and you're trying to change row spacing, but you still want to utilize all that underground PVC, you can change the cultural direction that you're farming to find different row spacing. I did not figure that out, but we did work with our surveyor, our irrigation engineers, and they found different combinations of cultural direction and row spacing, and we have reused an irrigation system 2 times. It's in the ground, I think 5 or 6 years now, and it's working out fantastic, and it literally is the exact same irrigation system that we're using on a second generation orchard. Okay, a couple just other random thoughts and questions about your distribution system. Go find out who installed it. Do they have maps? Do they have good records? Are the records updated? Has the map been updated from when it was initially installed? Again, the partners that you work with, the partners that you choose, they're gonna help you through this whole thing. You're not in it by yourself. How many hours is that irrigation system gonna take? How many hours of running to meet peak ETC? That is super important when you're trying to do whole split sprays and it's 100 degrees. It's also important if you are trying to save some money and not irrigate during your peak utility pricing. The cost of operation. This is something that I'm trying to develop and trying to create this dialogue with our vendors when we're trying to evaluate different systems. I'm not trying to break it down to a true cost per dollar, but I think we ought to be able to calculate the kilowatt or the gallons of diesel needed to pump and irrigate an acre foot of water. That is something that I really want, as we develop some more, I want to start creating that dialogue so that I know not only upfront costs, but the continual costs that we're going to have for the life of that orchard. Along those same lines, I want to know the maintenance, the cost of maintaining that system. A lot of times, a cheaper system to install will require bigger hose on the surface. That bigger hose is still going to get chewed up by the same squirrels, still going to get chewed up by the same mower going through there, and every time you have to make a repair, that bigger hose, those bigger couplers are going to be more expensive, and you're going to pay that over the life of your orchard. You know your own economic situation, maybe a lower upfront cost, maybe that's okay, that you can pay for that maintenance over the life of the orchard, but sometimes the operation maintenance costs really do compound over a 20, 25-year investment. Other things about the distribution system, if you are trying to now tie multiple systems through your main line, is there anywhere out there that you can isolate your water source to certain blocks of trees? That's going to help you anytime you have a leak in the middle of the season and that main line needs to be drained. Also, when you're injecting fertilizer, how confident are you that the fertilizer you're injecting at the pump is getting to the trees that you intend to? So having some of these isolation valves in the main line has been really helpful for us. Do keep in mind your distribution uniformity when you are reusing a system. It's going to be a challenge. So if distribution uniformity is paramount for your operations, understand that is probably a trade-off that you're going to have to be giving up. Another one also for some of the cheaper irrigation systems is the higher sprinklers. You'll have less sprinklers per acre, but that's going to be putting water up into the canopy. That's going to cause foliar disease. It's going to cause an increased need for fungicides. So that is going to be an unintended consequence of going with some of these, repurposing an irrigation system. So in the end, you got to ask yourself, really, how much money are you saving? Is that an upfront cost, or is that something that you're thinking about return on investment over a 20-year period? And once again, if you have an old flood system, there is a possibility for groundwater recharge. I think that's only going to be more important as we move on into the future. And some of these old flood systems on these ranches, that really is an asset that you have. So I think we need to start looking at some of those old flood systems truly as an asset. Okay, now last but not least, this isn't directly irrigation infrastructure, but it is something that I do think ties in pretty closely is some of the soil mapping and some of the technology that we have nowadays with soil mapping. You can get these soil maps, and it's basically a Veris sled or an electronic sled that can go through that field and get you a high resolution of your different soil types out there. It's going to tell you where your heavier clay soils are, where your lighter sand and gravel soils are. That will help you if you are trying to place soil moisture probes, microtensiometers, or any of those other sap flow devices, all that technology that is great and amazing, but don't you want to know where to put it with some confidence or what section of the field that really represents? Also, if you're ever going to use aerial imaging and you want to see some variability of the canopy, it's nice knowing if that variability matches the soil types or if it is something that is not matching soil types. Typically, that's something that's going to be pest related. So don't only share this and keep this in your company, share it with your PCA. Use this as a tool for scouting for nutrient, water, or pest. Really, those soil variability maps, everyone in your company can use to diagnose problems out there. Once you've got that variability map, if you want to take it to the next level, you can go then and start doing some core sampling in those different zones and send each foot or every 18 inches into the lab and go get your physical characteristics of the soil, mineral characteristics of the soil. Once you've done that, it'll not only tell you the nutrient holding capacity and the water holding capacity of all those different soils in your root zone, but it'll also tell you your infiltration rate. Like I said, sometimes these systems are used for for frost control. Frost control systems apply a lot of water. Those aren't always the best ones to irrigate with. So once you understand your application rate and your infiltration rate, now you can start utilizing that water and making sure the water gets to the soil and into the trees and not running off. Next, once you kind of get those mineral samples throughout there, you can tell if the water-soluble nutrients are coming back up into the root zone from a perched water table, or are they being flushed all the way through? Maybe you've got an impermeable layer somewhere in there. If you have some of this soil mapping done before you do your tillage and that kind of stuff, there's an opportunity to make some improvements there. The other nice thing about some of the soil mapping, once you have it, it's good relatively forever. It's going to be good for the life of that orchard. This is a geological issue. It's not a man-made issue. So once you understand that, that information should be good for the life of the orchard. So 3 takeaways. Automated valves are amazing. Soil mapping is amazing. And also know your operation. If you're not going to use it, don't buy it. That's all I got today. All right.
Very good. Okay, Greg, you go next. Forward, backwards. No pointer.
Very good. Okay. Thank you, Sebastian. Thanks for the opportunity to speak about replant problems in this session. And I'd also like to mention that I'm the one speaking here, but this is what I'll talk about has been a real team effort of a lot of folks, notably Jamie Ott, Farm Advisors Jamie Ott, Brent Holtz, Phoebe Gordon, and Mohammed Yagmar. So thanks to them. All right. So we've heard from Brent and Matt about a lot of investment in setting the stage for a productive orchard, and especially important, of course, now with the financial challenges. And what this presentation is managing the biological risk factors that fall in the category of replant problems. If we're going almond after almond or even some other hosts, the previous crops can leave us with some challenges that might not let us realize the full potential of our investments in infrastructure. Let's see. The title is Alternatives to Soil Fumigation. So it sounds like that's the subject. But the reason for this is there's really some uncertainty in the tools that we have to deal with these replant problems. Of course, fumigation is an excellent pre-plant soil fumigation, has been used successfully to manage these replant problems that I'll talk about. But there's some uncertainty in how long we'll be able to use soil fumigation in the ways that we're using it now. Cost uncertainties, regulatory uncertainties, access uncertainties. We're in an urban state, a lot of things changing fast. And so for this reason, the Almond Board has really emphasized a research program that includes an eye to alternatives to soil fumigation. And that's really what I'm going to focus on here. And you might ask, well, these things are expensive, right? And I'm going to try to address that for you as well. Okay, what are the replant problems that we're concerned about and need to deal with in many cases in order to realize full value of the investments we've put into an orchard? The two key categories are phytopathogenic nematodes. These include the root knot nematode, which, at least for the common root knot nematode that we have in California, we have good rootstock resistance for. It's available. We have some resistance to the ring nematode, not as good, and probably a little less resistance to the lesion nematode. These phytopathogenic nematodes are certainly not universal in occurrence among almond orchards, but where they do occur, they can rob yield over the life of an orchard. All the soil disturbance that we do in replanting, setting up a new orchard, that tends to drop the nematode populations down to very low, if not undetectable levels. But they can build over time. If they started from a good population before all that disturbance, they can build, and then after a few years, start robbing the productivity of an orchard and persist for that whole lifetime. Now, in contrast, this other major replant problem, prunus replant disease, I would say it's probably more widespread than phytopathogenic nematodes when you replant almond after almond or some other stone fruit species. In contrast to nematodes, it hits a replanted orchard early, just especially the first year, a little less the second year, gradually tapers off, but orchards can get hammered right away after replanting if they have a severe case of this prunus replant disease. What causes it? Good question. We do have good evidence that it's a microbially induced phenomenon. I would say, especially based on DNA studies that we've done over the years funded by the Almond Board, especially in the bacterial soil microbial community, tends to be the tightest associations with incidence of the disease among soils. But we don't know precisely. We don't have one causal agent that we can pin things on, and so therefore we don't have good diagnostics. And experience and history of the problem in an area tends to be the best predictor. Okay, this is a severe case that I'm showing in the image on the right half. A healthy tree on the left, on your left, in fumigated soil, and then on the right, a tree at the same time, same orchard, but the soil was not pre-plant fumigated where it was planted. And you see the lesser development of the feeder root system and the wilting of the tree. Let's see. This is a more, whoops, too far. Yep. This is a more typical case of prunus replant disease. On the left, the soil was pre-plant fumigated on your left, and on the right, the soil was not pre-plant fumigated before planting prunus or almond after almond. Okay, back to the topic of alternatives to fumigation, or fumigation for that matter. A first alternative to fumigation is to consider not fumigating. And to assess whether or not you fumigate, it's best to start this assessment before you remove the old orchard, because that's when you have a shot at accurately assessing your phytopathogenic nematode populations. All the disturbance that you do in the replanting process can reduce populations to non-detectable levels. Also, you want to consider in the need for fumigation, or alternatives, have you had a problem with prunus replant disease before? If you don't fumigate, do you tend to see very poor growth of the trees, especially if you've had strips that are fumigated and not fumigated? You can evaluate the benefit that you may see. And then fallowing is a big factor. Do you intend to fallow for several years before you replant, in years of water shortage, so on? The reason I mention this is each year you approximately have the intensity of the replant problem you're likely to experience. So if you go for 4 years, you get down to the fact where, well, I probably don't need to pre-plant fumigate. Okay, and then also the rootstock can enter into it. There are many reasons we choose rootstocks, but we have noticed that, and Roger will cover that, we have noticed that hybrids, at least peach almond hybrids, have been less sensitive to this prunus replant disease complex. Okay, now with fumigation, over the years, we've learned how to take a very dialed-in approach to where we fumigate and what fumigants we use, whether we need to do it at all. And I won't go into the details here, but basically, this is kind of an assessment matrix of the different possibilities of where you would put your fumigants, either broadcast, strips, spots. All those are options now. And we can tailor those options to the pest problems, like in the left column of that table. And I think that this kind of concept of thinking about the matrix of the problems we're after and what tools we have to go with them, it also applies to alternatives to fumigation. Okay, finally, what are these alternatives to fumigation that I'm talking about? The best, or the most effective approach that we found in managing almond replant problems is anaerobic soil disinfestation. And basically the progression is shown here in the steps and components of ASD, I'm going to call it. First, upper left, you've got rice bran being applied in a strip that will drive the ASD process. This is a powdery rice product that's available in our state. Next step is incorporation of that bran. Then it's covered with an auxiliary irrigation system. You can't really see it very well, but there's drip tapes being laid in there, and it's simultaneously being covered with tarp, clear tarp. And then that whole system is irrigated so that we wet the entire soil profile that we want to manage with ASD. So 5 to 6 feet depth, you're putting on that much water to saturate that entire soil profile within the first day or two. And then after that, every other day at least, sometimes every day, we'll pulse the system, the irrigation system a little bit to maintain that soil water overfield capacity. And what that does, well, and the final step is the cleanup. Removing the tarp, removing the auxiliary irrigation system, if that's what you've used, and getting ready to plant. So, of course, this takes a season out of production. I mean, you're going to have a year of fallow in this process to do it right, because the ASD needs good solar radiation. Best would be middle of summer, but also late summer, very early fall can work. What happens biologically and chemically in these soils that are ASD treated, you raise the soil temperature with that tarp. With the inundation of moisture, you allow bacteria in the soil to use that substrate, that rich carbon available substrate that you've put in the soil. They chew it up. They produce lots of organic acids. You lower the pH. A lot of these materials are volatiles that in their combined effect, although we don't know precisely what happens and what's important, collectively they will shift the soil microbial community to a more favorable one for almond tree growth. Included in that would be, if you do the full process, mortality of a lot of the nematode communities. Okay, that's the full process though, and I mentioned that we were talking about dialing in the process to try to save money, because that has actually been a main focus of the research recently. And over the experiments that we've done over the years, we've learned that, hey, we're achieving some things with just the substrate alone, at least with rice bran. Maybe we could get by with just using the rice bran alone, and we have some data to suggest that there is a great benefit to that. So our research, we've tried all kinds of combinations, but most recently we dealt with two combinations. One is the full process that I just went through with you. Both, we've done it with rice bran and comparatively using ground up almond hull and shell because it's been cheaper to drive the process. That involves the water and the tarp and everything. And then we've also just used the carbon sources as amendments alone. So we started with the strip applications and incorporation with the rototiller and stopped there. That's it. Okay. There we go. And this is just a listing of the treatments in our most recent trial at the Kearney Ag Center, where we had those reduced level of treatments. At the bottom there, you see the list of the treatments. The controls on the left, treatments 1 and 2, are just no treatment at all, or control with water and tarp, but no carbon substrate. And then we did the rice bran amendment, treatment 3, the full ASD treatment, treatment 4 with rice bran, and the same 2 treatments with ground up almond hull and shell, 5 and 6. And then our standard, our benchmark for success, is pre-plant fumigation with 1,3-D and chloropicrin. Shank applied. I consider that to be our optimal pre-plant soil fumigation treatment, at least for when the main problem is prunus replant disease. Okay, the economics of these treatments. Here I'm dealing with just the rice bran treatments in comparison to fumigation. You see on the top, the fumigation comes to roughly $1,400 per acre. The second treatment, rice bran alone as an amendment, but no full ASD, water or tarp, a little less than fumigation, about $1,200 an acre. If we do the full treatment, the full ASD treatment with rice bran plus water and tarp, the cost really jumps up because of the irrigation system that we have to add, the totally impermeable film, tarp disposal. We're up to over $2,000 to the acre. Okay, same overlook here, but with almond hull and shell. Pretty low price as just an amendment, under $900 per acre. Same comparison with fumigation, and we're able to keep the price down for the full ASD treatment with almond hull and shell. The prices are down compared to what they were 6 months ago, but still we can't get it down to the cost of fumigation. Okay, what do we achieve with those treatments? This is just looking at the first 3 years of performance of that orchard where the treatments were applied. On the left, you see growth impacts in year 1 and 2. On the right, you see the first year yields in the block. These are for Monterey, and you can see that there's pretty severe suppression in growth and yield in the controls, no impact of the water at tarp or with the water or tarp without substrate. You see the rice bran alone as an amendment gave us quite a jump in performance in terms of yield there. The best, even a little better than fumigation, was a rice bran full ASD treatment with water and tarp. We had virtually no value out of the almond hull and shell amendment just alone, but when we added water and tarp, we did pretty good. Not quite as good as fumigation here, with Monterey at least, but approaching that. And then fumigation on the end. Okay, same graphs, but with non-Perel, same orchard. And you see, again, the best treatment was the full ASD treatment with rice bran, but we did a little better comparatively with the rice bran amendment alone, as good as fumigation with a little less cost there. But again, really no significant value of the almond hull and shell as an amendment alone. But notice that the almond hull and shell full treatment, again, gave us good performance. We matched the fumigation benefit here. Now, if you're looking at if you multiply the almond price by the yield gain so far, obviously in year 1, we have not captured the investment in any of these pre-plant soil treatments. But this will persist and go on for some years, so we'll have to let it play out. But I did want to show you results of some trials, other trials involving ASD, where we had more of a yield assessment opportunity over time. The graph on the left shows one of our, I think it was our first ASD experiment, and you see that the rice bran, water, and tarp over the first 2 years of yield, we had a very good equivalent to fumigation response in yields. And then on the right, it's another trial where we were also testing the full ASD treatment with almond hull and shell, and we matched the benefit there with rice bran, and those treatments approached the benefit of fumigation. And here you can see, if you multiply the math out with the price of almonds, we have probably recovered our investment in the cost of these treatments and a little more, at least certainly for the fumigation, and probably for the almond hull and shell. But we weren't doing the amendments alone in these trials, so I don't have the data for that. Okay, a few comments to conclude with. One I would make is that whole orchard recycling has become the rule among replanted almond orchards. And one question is, well, will ASD work with whole orchard recycling? And the answer is yes. We have done those trials, and the processes are compatible, ASD and whole orchard recycling. We did find a benefit of adding ammonium sulfate along with the incorporation of the wood chips. Our thought was that there might be a need to avoid nitrogen immobilization with the wood chips during the ASD process, and it actually was beneficial to performance of the orchard planted after those treatments. Okay, another comment. Working with farm advisor Phoebe Gordon, we've explored, I would say, the fertilizer implications of these treatments, the rice bran especially, which is a good source of phosphorus. And we've been interested, is rice bran, is its phosphorus content giving us that big kick in growth? And I think the answer is we can't explain it just based on that, so there may be some like microbial interactions going on as well. But In the research that Phoebe and I have done, we have found that yes, there's a response to phosphorus fertilization that's statistically significant. It's not anywhere the level of response that we get with fumigation or ASD, but it is significant, and it probably is economical. These are yields shown here in the graphs on the right in the Kearney trial, and you see that we have gotten a significant increase following. This is about a 6-ounce application over at the beginning of the season for P205. It'd be 2.6 ounces of just P. But you see that significant response. And this wasn't just in this Kearney trial, it's occurred in several other trials that Phoebe and I have done together. So I think you want to think about phosphorus in your fertilization program in managing replant issues. Okay, so key points. I would say that pre-plant soil amendment with rice bran alone may provide adequate and economical prevention of PRD. It's an affordable treatment. I think there's enough rice bran to do a fair amount of this, probably not enough to do all of our almond replant acreage. Pre-plant ASD, the full process, driven by either rice bran or almond hull and shell, are technically the most effective for the range of replant problems you'll find, but they're still encumbered by pretty high expense and I would say logistical complications in getting them done. ASD and amendment benefits are compatible with whole orchard recycling and optimal fertilization practices. And the final thing I'd really like to drive home for thought is that I think we're at a stage where commercial trialing and innovation is really what will make or break this approach to dealing with alternatives to fumigation. So I think many of us who work in this area would really benefit from you commercial growers, your insights, your ideas about innovation, your willingness to try things in a small block year orchards that you're replanting, all those things. So I know I've gone long, but I thank you, and we'll go with Roger.
Good afternoon, everybody. So I'm Roger Duncan, Farm Advisor in Stanislaus County. So we've given these talks so many times on almond rootstocks, but I think we wanted to do this again and just look at some of the financial aspects of this as well. So we have now over 40 years of research with all of these rootstocks. 12, 13, 14 advisors through the years that have worked on these rootstocks through the years. So I think we have a lot of really good information on all of the commercial rootstocks that are available now, or mostly. There will always be new rootstocks that are introduced, but I think that most of the stuff that's out there that's commercially available, we have some pretty good information on. So rootstocks can influence a lot of things, and we've made the statement in the past that choosing the right rootstock is probably more important than choosing the variety, and this is particularly true if you're in an area that has any kind of challenges. The rootstocks influence so many things. I think we think about nematodes, soil-borne diseases like Phytophthora, for instance, and then soil chemistry tolerance, which maybe some people don't think about as much, but sodium, chloride, higher pH soils, and things like that. Certainly vigor. Data maturity, though, is very much affected. So the more vigorous the tree is, usually it pushes maturity back. Could be a peach almond hybrid might push it back at least 2 weeks compared to a Nemagard or Lovell. Bloom time, not really affected very much. It can be affected, certainly if you're in an area with low chill or something, you can have some low chill rootstocks, but for the most part, not maybe 1 day difference between bloom of among the rootstocks, something like that. But nutrition is interesting. We've kind of done a lot of leaf sampling some of these trials. There are some differences in nutrition among these rootstocks. And then drought tolerance is something that I think we need to look at more. we don't have a lot of good information as to, just how much these rootstocks affect drought tolerance. We assume some things, but. So one thing we can look at is potassium and the uptake of potassium by these rootstocks. And so in this case, this is a trial that's in western Stanislaus County, and this is potassium, leaf potassium. So these tables are sort of color-coded. So everything that's sort of that brownish sort of color is a peach-almond hybrid. So it's half peach and half almond. If it's yellowish, it's a peach. And if it's purplish, it has some plum, so half plum. And then Atlas and Viking are complex hybrids. But anyway, so one thing you may notice here is that all of these peach almond hybrids that are circled in red there, you look at these potassium levels of 2.1 up to 2.5 almost, and compare that to the rootstocks at the bottom: Lovell, Krimsk 86, Rootpack R, Nemagard. Big differences in potassium. So this year, you go back, you look at your leaf sample from July. If I have a leaf sample of 2.4% potassium, I'm thinking, there's a spot right there I can cut back. If I'm on Lovell or Krimsk 86 and at 1.4, that's below our critical threshold. We better put some potassium out. So here's an instance of where rootstock can really save you some money. This doesn't happen like this in all of our trials, but there are generally differences. But this was a pretty large difference. The other elements are taken up differently as well. In this case, we're looking at sodium. We're looking at chloride. This is from a rootstock trial in the Keys area in Stanislaus County. Again, same sort of color coding. So the ones that are circled there in red: Empyrean 1, Hansen, GF677, and Cornerstone. 3 of those are peach almond hybrids, and then Empyrean 1 is it's actually a hybrid of 2 peach species, but it acts very much like a peach almond hybrid. You can see that the big differences here, big numbers in differences in sodium and chloride. The threshold for sodium is 0.25%. Threshold for chloride is 0.3%, and some of these peach rootstocks in this case were double or triple even what we wanted to see. So big differences in sodium chloride. That means you get more growth. That means you get just longer lived trees and higher productivity in this case with some of these peach almond hybrids. Viking would be something in the middle, not quite as tolerant as a peach almond hybrid, but definitely better than peach rootstock like Lovell, Guardian, and Nemagard. Nematodes. This is, again, something that we think about, that rootstocks do. So in this case, we have 2 columns, one for ring nematode and one for root lesion nematode. Unfortunately, we don't really have rootstocks that are all that resistant to root lesion nematode. That's for future research, or that's continuing research. Ring nematodes, we have a lot of information. So peach almond hybrids in general. And in this case, we're looking at Nichols, Cornerstone, and Hansen, but there are all these others, Bright's hybrid, Titan, many others. And they're all very, very similar. There's some subtle differences, but as a group, peach almond hybrids grow a lot of ring nematodes and therefore are very susceptible to bacterial canker. If you look at the bottom of the list, the Viking and Guardian in this case had none. So if you have ring nematodes and you're not going to be able to fumigate, then you can look at this rootstock information and make a decision. Maybe you could plant a more resistant rootstock to ring nematode, for instance. Phytophthora, this is a lot of work that's, Greg Browne has done a lot of work with and continues to do more work with rootstocks. And in this case, I'm not showing numbers, but just as a general category, those purplish rootstocks, those are rootstocks that have plum in them. They're either plum or half plum. And this is the group that is the most resistant to Phytophthora, and I'm assuming other water mold fungi as well. And the peach almond hybrids, for instance, Bright's, Cornerstone, all those that are listed there, as a group are highly susceptible. And Atlas and Viking also highly susceptible. And what's interesting is some of the peach rootstocks, like Nemagard, for instance, are actually, they're still moderately susceptible, but they're not as susceptible as a peach almond hybrid, for instance. Anchorage. So this really, you know, we've done a lot of research on you know, the first half of the orchard's life, and I think we don't really think as much about the end of the life and how do we prolong the orchard's lives. And you know, one of the things that happens over the years is you start getting trees that start to lean. So anchorage is pretty important. And so here there's a list of these rootstocks. You can see that some of the peach almond hybrids like Hanson and FXA, for instance, have had excellent anchorage. Krimsk 86 and Viking also, I think, would fall into that category. Of course, vigor, tree size is a real important thing that rootstock imparts. So here we have a photograph of Nichols, which is a peach almond hybrid on your left, and Lovell, which is a peach on your right. So you can just see big difference in tree size, and that has a lot of, it means a lot of things in terms of yield potential and even navel orangeworm and things like this. So here in general, rootstock vigor increases as you go from a plum or a plum hybrid rootstock up through the peach rootstocks like Nemegard, Guardian, and Lovell, and the most vigorous in general are the peach almond hybrids. And again, there are some subtle differences. Titan hybrid is one of the most vigorous. Cornerstone and Brights would be some of the lower vigor of that group, but as a group, they are more vigorous than a peach rootstock. So again, if you're, you know, if you have got to maybe reduce, and this is some things that we still need to look at. So nitrogen, for instance, if you have to reduce your nitrogen a little bit, you know, you can still get more growth with a peach almond hybrid. Maybe we can reduce, you know, some of our fertilizer inputs if we have a more inherently more vigorous rootstock. So effect on yield. So this is the center column shows the 2022 yield, which was the last year we took data from this trial, and then the next, the right column shows the cumulative yield for 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 9th, and 11th leaf harvests. Again, it's the upper, those top 5, the highest yielding rootstocks through those years have all been peach almond hybrid rootstocks. The lowest yielding rootstocks through the years have been, you know, industry standards, Lovell, Krimsk 86, and Nemegard. And this is really closely related to vigor, but it's not just vigor. I mean, when you have a bigger tree, you're able to outgrow some things and you have more fruit wood every year. But we're also seeing an increase in yield efficiency. So generally, a little larger yield on the same side or per unit of canopy. And if you look again, follow that out and look at the gross income. So through these 6 harvests, if the grower, so if that whole orchard that we were looking at, that this trial is in, is on Nemegard. And so these are the numbers that show, well, what would the grower maybe have made if he would not have used Nemegard and if he would have planted on one of these other rootstocks instead. And so through those 6 harvests, we can see that those peach almond hybrid rootstocks, BB106, well, just those top rootstocks, you know, were $9,000 to $11,000 an acre more if we would have chosen those rootstocks versus Nemegard. So this is big dollars and cents here, and this is, you know, not more water, not more fertilizer, nothing different, just choosing a different rootstock. And again, mentioned it's not just more yield because the trees are bigger, but there's actually a little higher in yield efficiency as well. So again, a little more yield per unit of canopy. So it's not just that we have more canopy, which we do, but it seems the canopy there seems to be a little more productive. So that was one trial. This is another trial. This is in Yolo County that Catherine Jarvis-Shien has been following. Very similar, and in this case, you go to the far right column and it shows the difference in gross income per acre if you would have chosen one of these other rootstocks instead of Lovell. And again, these, you know, look at Nichols, Titan, Florida Guard by Alnem, you know, $20,000 an acre more if cumulatively if you would have picked one of those rootstocks rather than Lovell. And I think in that case, a lot of growers in Sacramento Valley are choosing Krimsk 86. You can see the numbers here, and so I guess what I would say is I wouldn't just fall into the trap of, well, this is what everybody's doing now, so I'm going to do this. You know, look at your orchard, think about what your challenges are, and maybe you can take advantages of another rootstock as well. of a different rootstock. Same sort of a thing. This is Butte County, different location, different trial. Very similar results again. These aren't ranked as well, but you can see that the higher yielding rootstocks are the most vigorous. The Nichols and Purion 1 in this case, and the lowest yielding the lowest yielding rootstocks would be the smaller rootstocks, Rootpeck R, Lovell, Krimsk 86. One of the things that we tend to see with these more vigorous trees and more vigorous rootstocks is we get larger kernel size. So that's probably one of the main reasons that we see a higher yield efficiency, is because the number of kernels, or the kernels themselves are larger than on a weaker rootstock. So you can, in this case, this is a pretty big difference. If you have kernels that are averaging 1.2 to 1.3 grams versus 0.9 to 1 gram. And again, well, I'm not sure how much I want to spend on this, but orchard longevity, this is something that we haven't really looked at as much. But in this case, this is an old rootstock trial planted in 1997, first one I was involved in. The orchard came out last year, and I was able to go through and do a tree count, just counting all of the original trees that were still there. And in this case, the Hanson Nichols, there were a lot of trees that were missing. Now, in this case, this was a very sandy, ring nematode infested, bacterial and canker infested orchard. And so all of those sort of Hanson and Nichols, or those trees, most of those trees were, they left the orchard within the first few years because of bacterial canker. But then if you kind of just look down the list, and Guardian and Viking were the rootstocks that had the fewest replants, in particular Viking, and that's because Viking was able to fend off the ring nematodes and the bacterial canker in the first part of the orchard's life. And then at the end of the orchard's life, when you started having trees on Lovell and Atlas starting to fall over because of crown gall and just the root decaying fungi, Viking was more resistant to that. And so now we, in this case, looking at those Viking trees, they could have gone I think they could have gone 10 more years. So, and then this is another case. This is that orchard in Keys. Just again, kind of went through and counted all the trees that were still the original trees. And in this case, again, we had more loss in the Nichols, Hanson, and Purion 1, so the bigger trees. And most of these trees were lost because of either shaker injury or structural damage. And so that was probably more of an effect of maybe too much vigor, or maybe the trees could have been put a little closer together. Now that we're learning that, you put trees closer together, they stay smaller and they live longer. But again, then you look at the far right side, and all of those rootstocks, Julior, Krimsk 86, Adesoto, those were all plum-based rootstocks. They're either plum or half plum. And so we know that, of course, those tend to be longer-lived rootstocks, mostly because of, I think, soil-borne pathogens, the resistance to soil-borne pathogens. All right, so let's just kind of skip through. So, so this point here is that rootstock canopy size is strongly related to yield. So the most vigorous rootstocks tend to be the highest yielding rootstocks. And so this kind of does call into question. We've always kind of assumed that we can, if you just have a smaller rootstock, you can just cram the trees in closer. And maybe now we're talking about doing off-ground harvesting, looking at dwarfing rootstocks. And so the question is, can we use dwarfing rootstocks and still maintain the same yields just by smashing the trees in more closely? And so I don't know. I think that's a really good question. Can you fully compensate for these lower vigor rootstocks by planting them more densely? I'm guessing the answer is no, but I think we need to continue and find out. So there's a ton of information, a ton of data. So the last couple of slides are just showing you resources that we have out there. So the next 4 slides have these QR codes. So if you want to take your phones out, take a picture of this, or use the camera to download these things, you can do that. So this is a new almond rootstock comparison chart that we put out just about a year ago, and it lists all of the rootstock, or almost all the rootstocks that are commercially available today, and all of their good things and bad things about them. So really, really good resource for almond rootstocks right here. We also have 2 videos out now. Catherine put one, or she recorded one, 2 years ago, I think. This was for her trial in Yolo County, where it started with some high boron. I don't think it's so high anymore, but she did a great job on this video walking through all of the rootstocks, and you can see what the trees look like. We recorded one this last summer for the west side of Stanislaus County. So the second video has just come out within a couple of days ago. Someone told me they watched it as they were driving up to this event. I wouldn't recommend that you do that while you're driving, but anyway, so this has just been out just in the last, I don't know, week or so. And there's no QR code on that. Okay, and then, so this is an online database that we have at the UC Davis Fruit and Nut Center. And it lists, again, more rootstocks than that are even on that guide. And you can click on each of those rootstocks, and it gives you all of the good and bad and the ugly about each of those rootstocks. And then finally, in that same website, you can use a rootstock comparison tool. So you can use this just like you're shopping for a dishwasher or something, and you can put in, say, 3 rootstocks that you're looking at. In this case, Brights 5, Atlas, and Krimsk 86. So you can, if you want to compare them side by side for Phytophthora resistance, nematode resistance, salt resistance, and that sort of a thing. So with that, I want to say thank you to everybody, and I think we have questions.
Thank you, Roger. Thank you all. A lot of research there, so thanks for sharing all your knowledge and your experience as well, Matt. Just want to say we have all of these videos in our YouTube channel, so if you didn't have the chance to take the QR codes or you didn't see a QR code for Roger's video, we posted in our YouTube channel, so you can get it from there as well as from almonds.com, where we have also different resources. And the Fruit and Nut Center, the slides that Roger was showing, they also have the trifold and the research database and all those resources, as well as in our booth too. So if you want to go to our booth right before they close, you can find those resources as well. Okay, questions, comments over there. Could you also repeat the question as well a little bit, or summarize the main points before you answer?
You're asking if doing whole orchard recycling, I would recommend adding chloropicrin to. We haven't in our trials seen an increased incidence of Phytophthora with whole orchard recycling. I have had a grower though who thought they had an increase with whole orchard recycling of Phytophthora, and it might be on really wet conditions, though the wood maybe could create a more moist condition in the wintertime. In a lot of those cases or that one particular case, I don't think the grower incorporated the wood chips as well as they could have, so they were kind of really heavy on the surface and next to the crown of the tree. So I'm wondering if that could have been a possibility. Greg and might want to comment on this too. I generally in all the fumigations, I've watched or observed a lot of Greg's data, and I like chloropicrin with the telone. In fact, I'm actually sometimes more convinced that chloropicrin is a better fumigant than telone. But I'll let Greg comment on that as well. But I think we have seen problems with whole orchard recycling when the wood chips aren't incorporated properly, especially when we used to haul wood chips to cogeneration plants. They were often where the piles had been. They didn't want to get any soil in the cogeneration plant, and they'd leave it a foot thick and on the soil surface there. And then since it was just where the piles were, nobody really tried to spread it out very nicely because it was a very small part of the orchard. So we've seen stunted growth in those areas, not particularly due to Phytophthora, but anyway, I would recommend chloropicrin, and I would recommend whole orchard recycling to try to make sure you incorporate it as well as you can. And Greg has done some work though that showed the wood chips didn't particularly interfere with the fumigation, probably because we are incorporating the wood chips mostly in the top 6 inches, and the fumigation, I believe, is usually like between 18 and 24 inches now.
Greg, you want to comment?
Yeah, so it seems like there's a few questions there, and I agree with Brent's comments that he's offered, and I'll just try to add some to them. First one was, is there any evidence that whole orchard recycling impacts incidence of Phytophthora diseases, I guess? And I would say no, not much anyway. Brent and I have collaborated on several trials, and Mohammed Yagmor has been part of those, some of those, and we looked at, whole orchard recycled versus non-recycled plots and followed incidence of Phytophthora disease in both on a pretty large scale, at least in the Kern County trials. And no, we did not see an association of whole orchard recycling with disease incidents caused by Phytophthora. That moisture impact is intriguing, though. I would say, maybe there's limits on, if you start, Phytophthora responds at the very high moisture levels, water saturation versus no saturation. You get slightly below water saturation, and the impact of the water goes way down. So just more moisture, I really doubt that you're impacting Phytophthora very much. And in fact, in most cases, I think you reduce the incidence and the length of the soil water saturation because of the improved water infiltration rate on some soils. So there's that question. Then I think you were asking about chloropicrin. Should we be adding chloropicrin when we do whole orchard recycling? I agree with Brent. Our data indicates that if you have a prunus replant disease issue, you want chloropicrin in there. It's the best of the fumigant. Of the 2 fumigants we have, mainly chloropicrin and 1,3-telone, chloropicrin is much better for management of the prunus replant disease. Very strong growth responses. And if you don't have a nematode problem, I would say yes, you can probably just use chloropicrin alone, but you have to temper that by, we can only use so much chloropicrin nowadays. And so the combination is assuring that you're going to get the job done. Let's see, and I think those are the key. Oh, I would not look at chloropicrin as a tool to manage Phytophthora with, though, honestly, because it presumes that the causal pathogen is in the orchard soil to begin with, and I think that is definitely not always the case. Sometimes it's coming with the nursery trees. It's a problem that the nurseries are doing a good job trying to manage, but it's a very difficult problem. So I think you have to look at, did the trees come in clean or not? And in any case, wherever the Phytophthora came from, chloropicrin is a one-shot deal. You either get the Phytophthora or you don't, and in no case, I would challenge anybody to eradicate Phytophthora from a soil that has Phytophthora in it with chloropicrin or any other fumigant. It just takes a little bit, and if the conditions are right, it can reproduce rapidly and come back. So it's all about cultural management, soil water management, rootstock choice, and that's enough. Yeah.
Thank you. We are unfortunately past of time, but if you have any follow-ups, feel free to come here and talk with the speakers. I just want to say thank you, everybody, for attending our session, and that the food trucks village will close at 1:30 p.m. So if you still want to grab something to eat, you can go there. And I hope you have enjoyed your time at the Almond Conference, and we will see you next year, and help me to give a big round of applause to our speakers here.